We have Jason here. He is the founder of Fractional MedTech LLC, which provides fractional R&D and technology leadership to medical device startups and growth stage companies. With 20 plus years of experience, he's led the development of over 16 FDA cleared devices spanning neurovascular, cardiovascular, urology, and critical care. Jason's leadership has driven over 200 million in projected revenue and over 6 million in cost savings through innovative engineering and strategic manufacturing partnerships. Previously, he held senior research and development roles at Stryker, BD, CR Bard, and Atricure, directing teams of over 30 engineers across multiple therapeutic areas. He holds 18 US patents and is a registered professional engineer in the state of Ohio and earned his Master's of Science in Mechanical Engineering from Wright State University and a Bachelor's in Science from Arizona State University. He is a former adjunct professor at the University of Cincinnati and guided by the belief that it isn't a medical device until it is used on a patient. Let's welcome Jason and go ahead and kick us off. You are muted.
Of course I am. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. Let's see. Maybe. There it is. I got too many screens. There we go. All right. Can you see the screen?
Yep, we see it.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, thanks, Angela. Appreciate the introduction. First off, I'd like to thank everyone who was able to make it this week and apologize for the inconvenience of having to reschedule. So good morning and welcome to Design Controls Are Not the Enemy. So the goal here is to kind of we're talking about transforming compliance into competitive advantage. I am the owner of Fractional MedTech, and I've spent over 20 years in med device development. Today, I want to kind of change how you think about design controls. Instead of viewing them as regulatory burdens that slow you down, the plan is to show you how they can become strategic advantage in the marketplace. And so before we dive in, here's a little bit of context on who I am and how I can help you. Angela did a great job on the intro, so I'll be brief here. Again, 21 years in med device, over 16 marketed devices. I have in 5 disease states. So working with Atricure, Stryker, Enable Injections, GCMI, CR Bard, Vertigon, and Quantec. It's been very, very fun. So now my goal is to help companies get to market faster in 3 ways. Provide services for startups who need strategic R&D leadership and hands-on support without that full-time overhead. Technical due diligence for investors evaluating medical device deals, and providing R&D strategies for working with regulatory consultants for companies facing specific FDA challenges. So welcome back to Design Control series. We had session 1 at the Biolocity Bootcamp, where we laid the foundation by covering what design controls are and why they exist. We talked about the FDA requirements and the basic framework. Today, we're taking that foundation, building upon it. Today is about transformation. I want you to leave here thinking differently about design controls. Instead of seeing them as compliance burdens, I want you to recognize them as roadmaps to excellence. So here's my challenge to you. What if the regulations aren't roadblocks, but roadmaps to excellence? That shift in perspective is what separates companies that struggle from companies that thrive. So what are we going to cover today? We've got 5 key objectives. First, going to reframe design controls as strategic tools, not paperwork exercises, but actual development accelerators. Secondly, we'll talk about flexible, scalable systems that grow with your company from startup to global enterprise. And third, and this is crucial, we'll discuss how design controls actually drive patient confidence through engineering excellence. Fourth, I'm going to show you how to accelerate development, not slow it down. And then finally, we'll discuss how all of this creates competitive advantages that some of your competitors may actually be using. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So here's the fundamental shift we need to make. And honestly, this is the most important slide in the entire presentation. The traditional view is often looked at as design controls equal regulatory burden, frustration. This is how most innovators think. It's seen as a necessary evil, a paper pushing contest, if you will. And they feel this is something the FDA makes you do. Checkbox exercise is something that I've heard people say. So what I want to do is kind of get you into the strategic view. Design controls equal engineering excellence. This is the mindset of companies that win in the marketplace. They see design controls as a systematic methodology for ensuring the innovations actually work, safe, and get to market faster because they don't have surprises late in the development cycle. This is primarily about risk reduction. The difference between these two mindsets determines your competitive position in the market. Companies that embrace this strategic view constantly beat their competitors on time to market, development costs, and regulatory success rates. So, why do innovators struggle with design controls? Well, let's be honest about it. First, design controls are typically seen as an after the fact requirement, something you retrofit onto your design when you're getting closer to the submission. Second, most systems are rigid and don't scale with growth. What works for a two-person company doesn't necessarily work for a 50-person company. And third, documentation is viewed as paperwork rather than value creation. Fourth, there's often no integration with actual development work. Engineers do their thing and then they scramble to document it later. And then there's the persuasive fear that implementing design controls will slow down innovation. Well, I'm here to tell you, let me, that every single one of these problems are solvable, and solving them can actually accelerate your development process. So, the strategic opportunity. So, what you're missing when you avoid or minimize design controls is you're missing the earlier risk identification that saves massive time and money. When you identify a design flaw in the concept phase or the earlier phases, ideation, concept, feasibility, versus in the verification or validation testing, you're talking about the difference between a few $100 versus tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars. A systematic approach actually reduces development cycles because you're not constantly backtracking to fix things you missed. Your documentation becomes institutional knowledge. When a key engineer leaves, that knowledge doesn't walk out the door with them. Your scalable systems grow with your company without requiring complete overhauls. And here's the kicker. Investor confidence skyrockets when you can demonstrate systematic control over your development process. Investors understand risk and they'll pay premium valuations for companies that manage this risk systematically. This is the strategic opportunity you're leaving on the table. So let me give you a framework. We did this at the Biolocity Boot Camp. I explained this framework, and so I want to go over it again. This is how I'd like you to start thinking about design controls strategically. It's 3 words: tell, do, show. That's it. Very simple. Tell means basically plan what you're going to do, document your intentions up front. And then do is the execution part. It means execute with systematic precision, follow your plan. And then show means demonstrate evidence of excellence, prove that what you did that you did what you say you were going to do. It isn't just compliance, this is the competitive advantage. When you can tell investors exactly what you're doing and going to do, you execute it systematically, and then you show concrete evidence of success, you become fundable, you become acquirable, you become successful. This framework works whether you're a 2-person startup or a 50, 500 person established company. The complexity scales, but the framework remains constant. So now one of the biggest mistakes that companies make is thinking design controls are a one size fits all. They're not. You need a flexible system architecture that scales with your ambitions. So let's kind of break this down into four different phases. If you're in the startup phase, you need essential controls only. You focus on the bare minimum that keeps you safe and moving fast. Growth phase, now that you're expanding documentation as you bring in more people and more complex devices. And then you've got the mature phase. You're building a full enterprise system that can handle multiple devices and multiple teams. And then, of course, the final one, global phase. You're aligning with multiple regulatory frameworks across different countries. And the key is to scale your design controls with your ambitions. Don't implement enterprise level systems when you're a startup, but don't keep startup level systems when you're a mature company. Match your systems to the stage of your growth. So let's talk a little bit about the infamous FDA waterfall diagram. Everyone looks at this and thinks it's completely linear. First, you do user needs, then design inputs, then process, outputs, verification, validation, done. But that's not really how it works. And the FDA knows that, and that's why they set this framework in place and you create your design controls around that. It's not really meant to be linear. It's about ensuring nothing falls through the cracks while maintaining development velocity. So there are feedback loops. The user needs inform design inputs, which inform the design process, but the design process will provide design outputs that informs the inputs that you actually need. Reviews happen throughout, not just at the end. And the way what I'm meaning there is during the design process, you could have maybe 4 or 5 different reviews within that process. And we'll show that in the next couple of slides. The key insight is that the FDA waterfall is actually a framework for systematic thinking, not a rigid sequence. When we understand that, we can maintain agility while still being compliant. So these are kind of a general 6 phases, 6 phases of development. You could have more than this. I've seen companies that have had 4. I've seen some that have had 10. So we'll just kind of stick to 6 phases. So we're going to break this down a little bit here. Phase one, sometimes it's called phase 0. It's the ideation or idea phase. This is where we have an idea and we need to figure out if it's even viable. And then you go into the next phase, and we're going to go with phase 2, and it's the concept feasibility. This is where you make risk-informed decisions about whether to even pursue an idea. Once you have that concept selection, then you go into your design phase. This is where your systematic specification development, where you define exactly what you're building and the why. Then phase 4, we get into verification. This is the proof of performance. You're confirming that your outputs meet your inputs. And then after that, you get into validation, real world confirmation. You're proving that your medical device actually meets your user needs in actual use conditions. And then phase 6 is transfer. It's where controlled commercialization, where you're moving from development to manufacturing. Each of these have specific goals, specific deliverables, specific decision points. The goal here is I'm going to create a couple other presentations where we're going to go through each of those phases in more detail. So when you structure your development this way, you create natural checkpoints that prevent problems from propagating forward. So let's talk about technical design reviews, or TDRs. These are your strategic development or decision points. They are critical for maintaining velocity. TDR1 is basically done at the end of the ideation or idea phase. This is where we are confirming that the idea has merit, that there's a problem that needs this engineering solution. Then you get into your phase 2. At the end of that, you have technical design review number 2. That's your basically concept validation. You're confirming the concept is worth pursuing. Then you get into TDR3, you get your final concept selection, and you've got the best design that meets the user needs, and you're moving forward into and through your verification phase. So TDR4 is verification. This is particularly important for class 2 devices. This is where you confirm verification and validation are complete and you're ready to submit to the FDA. TDR5, you have that when you're ready for the market. You've got clearance, you've transferred to manufacturing, and then you're launching. So the critical point here is that these gate reviews can accelerate, not delay. When done right, these technical design reviews can catch problems early, ensure alignment across teams, and give executives confidence to release funding for the next phase. They're acceleration gates, not approval bureaucracy. So let's talk a little bit about risk management because this is where design controls really prove their value. The goal is early risk identification. Find problems earlier when the fixes are cheap, not expensive. So let's talk a little bit about different types of FMEAs that you should be doing. An application FMEA, this is one we don't in some companies, I've not seen people actually use application FMEAs. They'll combine design and application as one. I've I like it more when people have 2 or 3 different types of FMEAs. One being application, 2 being design, and the third one being process. The application of FMEA, or some people even call the user FMEA, this ensures safety by analyzing how users might misuse your device. This should be happening early in the process as it helps influence and inform the design. Then you've got the design FMEA. This is the one that can prevent costly redesigns by identifying design weaknesses before you build anything. Systematic hazard analysis looks at all possible hazards across the device lifecycle. It also helps understand verification testing requirements. Process FMEA, this is what helps optimize manufacturing by identifying where your manufacturing process might create risks to the design. When you do these systematically and early, you identify problems when the costs, again, are in the hundreds, versus as you move throughout the design process, they become tens and thousands of dollars. That's the time savings. You're front loading your problem identification instead of discovering issues in clinical trials or worse, post market. So the other thing I want to do is also reframe how you think about documentation. So your design history file isn't compliance paperwork. It's think about it as company intelligence. It's institutional memory. When you document decisions, you're capturing the why behind your design choices. When you document tests, you're capturing the lessons learned systematically. There are probably several methodologies to capture this. I personally like having evaluations captured in some sort of doc control system. It doesn't have to be a released and attached to the 510K, but at least it's somewhere where it can be searched. This has an enormous practical value. Training new engineers becomes dramatically easier, faster, because they can just read the documents within the doc control system and the DHF and understand why decisions were made. Regulatory submissions are streamlined because you're not scrambling to recreate documentation. It's all there. And then there's one that people don't think about is IP protection through documentation, such as the drawings that you create. So we need to pause our thinking of documentation as a burden and start thinking as building our company's knowledge base. That's the strategic asset that I'm thinking about and talking about.
Hey Jason, can I interrupt with that?
Yep.
Because now that you circled back to the burden piece, one of the questions that Mark Adams put in, and I think it's good in the middle of this to reiterate this, but his question is, given your many years of experience, can you comment on any theories as to why design controls and documentation that you just mentioned are not seen as valuable tools and rather just burdensome paperwork? Like, how did we get here?
How did we get here? Thanks, Mark. I know I've worked with Mark for many years, so thanks, Mark. Um, I think it's some of it's cultural. It's got to come from the top. So how did we get here where we think it's burdensome? Um, I don't think a lot of entrepreneurs and innovators really like to document things as they should. And it's one of those, it's you've just got to change your mindset, and it's to start with the why type of thing. Why do we need to do this? Well, we need to make sure that one, we can train other people. Two, we can make sure that our business is successful moving forward. The company Atricure that I worked with, uh, it all came down to a notebook that somebody documented a lot of the reasons of why they did what they did with the ablation clamps. That actually saved the company by because another company, another large company, and I think you mentioned Angela, you work for Medtronic, had documented their radio frequency ablation clamps, but it all came down to the systematic documentation that that engineer had that we beat Medtronic in the patentability, I believe, by 2 weeks because everything was signed. So it's signed in their notebook, and it was done 2 weeks earlier. So they were granted the IP. So that's specific to that. So again, I think it's a cultural thing. We've just got to understand that it is useful to do it, and it can save your company. I think that answered the question. Mark, you good?
I love it. I think in startup, right, we want to go fast and we don't see how these things, how sometimes slowing down actually speeds us up in the ecosystem. And so that discipline part of it is so key. And I like to pick someone on the team who really is a nerd in documentation and make them own this, right? So that you have a champion
Yep.
for that. Love it.
Yeah, and those people exist. There are those people out there that love doing that. So, and I think today with the tools that we have, I mean, you can dictate into Word, and then you can throw it into Chat GPT and say, "Hey, can you work this out for me and help me document this?" I mean, it's I've seen some fundamental shifts in design controls using AI now, working with a company doing that. So there are some really cool advances coming. Thanks for the question, Mark. All right, so agile design control. So you're probably thinking that sounds very rigid. So what about agile? That's the whole sprinting and things like that. So you can do agile design controls. So let's kind of think this through or walk through this. So sprint-based documentation means you're documenting as you go in 2 week sprints, not waiting till the end. Continuous verification means you're constantly testing against requirements, not just doing one big verification event at the end. Iterative validation means that you're validating concepts early and often, getting user feedback continuously. I work for a company that we had animal labs every other week, or at least once a month. And the teams were basically focused on getting to that lab every week. In one instance, I had a team where we took the device into the animal lab, and it completely obliterated the tissue we were testing, which was not what we wanted. And we knew that we had 2 weeks to fix this and get back in. The team went out. They basically sprinted. The next lab, we were back in. We had several different concepts, and we were able to move through it very, very quickly. And that device is actually on the market today. And I'm glad we did that because we learned something. So let's see, living documentation. That means your documents evolve as your design evolves. They're not static artifacts created at the end, and they're not actually created at the beginning, and they stay that way. Most documents within the design controls are living documents. You update as you go. The key also is to understanding the design controls are about systematic thinking, not rigid processes. You can actually maintain agility while being systematic. Design controls only work when your entire team is aligned. So let's talk about cross-functional excellence. Engineering drives technical excellence. They own the technical specifications and the design decisions. Quality ensures systematic compliance. They're the guardians of the process, and they help identify where you might have gaps. Manufacturing, they enable the scalability. They're thinking about how to actually make this device at volume. And then regulatory clears the path. They're your guides through the approval process and should be involved early, not late. What I mean by that is a lot of times we bring regulatory in kind of midway on, hey, are we doing this right? And honestly, they need to be brought in at when you have the idea or at least a good concept selected, and they can provide you with guidance on a lot of the testing that you need. And then marketing, well, they're the ones that validate the market needs. They ensure that what you're building is actually what customers want to buy. When all five of these functions are integrated from day one, basically magic happens. Problems get caught early, decisions are made faster, and everyone understands how their work fits into the bigger picture. And that's the cross-functional excellence. So let's talk about technology enablers for digital design controls. The old days of paper-based DHFs and filing cabinets, they're pretty much over. Modern design control systems are digital and collaborative. Cloud-based document management mean your teams can access documents from anywhere, and you have automatic version control. Automated workflow triggers mean that when one person completes a task, the next person automatically gets notified. Real-time collaboration tools means engineering and quality can work together on the same document simultaneously. And then version control integration ties your design controls documents to your actual design files in CAD or PLM systems. And dashboard reporting that gives the real-time visibility into where projects stand. These technology enablers don't just make compliance easier, and they make development faster and more transparent. And of course, these are scalable for what the need is for your team. All right, so let's talk a little bit about tailoring design controls to device classification. For class one devices, you want minimal but effective controls. You need basic design controls, enough to ensure safety, but not so much that you're buried in paperwork. Essential documentation only, focused on the high risk areas, streamlined processes, simple workflows that are easy to follow, focus on safety fundamentals, concentrate, on the things that could actually hurt patients, and quick market entry. Get to market fast because class one is a lower risk. The key is proportionality. Don't implement class three processes for a class two or class one device. Match your design controls to your actual risk. Class two, this is where a lot of the devices live. It's about, and it's all about the 510K excellence here. Your strategy is substantially equivalence. You're showing your device is similar to a predicate device that's already cleared. Predicate device analysis is critical. You've got to really understand your predicate inside and out. That said, also the de novo, that can fall into this classification. Target verification and validation means you focus your testing on areas where you differ from the predicate. Risk-based approach means that you put more rigor into high-risk areas and less into low-risk areas. And then this is a 90-day submission that means you're designing your development timeline to hit the FDA review clock. Class two is a balancing act. Enough rigor to ensure safety and effectiveness, but not so much that you're treating it like a class two device. Most innovators over-engineer their class two approach. Be very strategic here. So class three, this is the big leagues. These are your PMA devices. Here's where you're going to need a comprehensive clinical strategy because you're going to need clinical data to support approval. Robust design controls are non-negotiable. The FDA will scrutinize everything. Extensive validation means you're doing extensive bench, animal, and human testing. And then process validation is a requirement that's not a requirement for class two. I will say that my understanding in the EU and the CE mark, they do want processes nailed down for class two devices. So risk benefit analysis becomes critical because for a class three device, the FDA accepts higher risks if the benefits justify them. And you get longer term or long-term market protection. PMA devices have significant barriers to entry for competitors, so you can protect your market position. They are expensive, they are time consuming, but this is also where some of the biggest medical innovations happen. So again, design controls aren't optional, and they're pretty much the foundation of everything you do for class three. So mention something about CE marking. So let's talk about going global. If you're planning to sell internationally, you need to think about the regulatory harmonization from day one. CE mark alignment with Europe means understanding MDR, IVDR, the ISO 1345 integration is critical. This is the international quality standard. Health Canada preparation means understanding their specific requirements. PMDA considerations for Japan and regulatory harmonization means designing your design controls to satisfy multiple regulators simultaneously, not doing separate work for each country. The smart move is to design for the most stringent requirements up front. If you meet the FDA and the MDR requirements, you can usually satisfy other countries. So make sure you reach out to your regulatory teammate or consulting agency. They're the ones that are going to really be very helpful here. And make sure you do it early. So I threw this slide in. So let's talk a little bit about the David versus Goliath and how startups can actually outcompete the big companies using smart design controls. Startups have faster decision making. You don't have this layers of approval. You can also have lean documentation, which means you focus only on what matters, not the bureaucratic overhead. Focus scope means that you're doing one device really well, not managing a portfolio. And then agile adaptation means you can pivot quickly based on what you learn. And market timing advantages means you can move faster to capture emerging opportunities. Here's the key insight. Big companies have more resources, but startups have more speed. Smart design controls enhance your speed advantage while maintaining risk. Smart design controls enhance your speed. Okay. Sorry, I'm repeating myself. Don't try to compete with big companies over their terms. Use lean, agile design controls to maintain your speed advantage.
Hey,
Okay.
Jason, can I ask you a
Yep.
question for anyone in the audience who might not really understand what agile is or what lean is? Can you dig in a little bit deeper into that just from a high level for someone who doesn't
Yeah.
understand what that means, what that is?
Okay. So agile came about years ago, and it has been hard to kind of pull that into medical device hardware design. A lot of it is in the software design. When you get into software, they talk about sprinting. They do like 2-week sprints. Software, it's a lot easier to do it within software versus hardware because hardware usually takes more than 2 weeks to make something. Software is something where you write code and you can delete code and add code very quickly. So they use this methodology called sprints in order to move faster, getting from one point to another. And they also have what's called a backlog, where if something works or doesn't work, they can log it. And there's a whole series of documentation that goes along with the agile approach. So it's basically just an approach. A lot of times um, we compare that to like portfolio or project management. Project management, we use a Gantt chart and we go from this task to this task to this task. It's very linear. Agile kind of takes that and they chunk it, I think would be the easiest way to describe that. Um, That's probably there's a whole nother course on agile. Lean documentation, lean practices is just how you it's working smarter. You do what's required, not all this other type of documentation or activities. So there's a whole Lean Six Sigma you've probably heard, which also has different tools in it. Again, that's like another episode, if you will. Does that help, Angela?
Yep, I love it. Thank you, Jason.
All right. Let's see. Okay. So let's talk about something every startup cares about, and that's investor confidence and then de-risking innovation. When you have the systematic development, you're reducing risk in a way investors can see and measure. Clear milestones demonstrate progress. Investors know exactly where you are and what's happening. Documentation proves capability. It shows you're not just smart engineers, you're a systematic company. The regulatory strategy shows a clear path to market. Investors can see how and when you get cleared. And team competence becomes evident. You demonstrate that the team is aligned and moving forward. Companies can raise funding at significant higher valuations simply because they have a strong systematic process in place. Investors pay premium for reduced risk. Your design controls are directly tied to your company valuation.
I want to double click on that, Jason, because I think that if for those who are listening and they say, "Hey, Mr. or Miss or whoever VC, fund me," then that should be your reminder when you think you don't have time for documentation, you think you don't have time for design control or for your quality management system or those kind of things. When investors see those things, or your regulatory consultant, reimbursement, that kind of stuff, when investors see those things, they say, this team has de-risked this. I know what I'm getting into, and I'm more. So it actually can save you money, don't you think, in the long term?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because when I worked with Bard, every time we looked at an opportunity, if they didn't have a physical entity, so basically they were quite a ways along and they didn't reduce the risk, we looked at it as well, we're going to value it lower because we know that there's a ton of work we're going to have to do. So definitely.
Love it.
Okay. So basically, let's remember the ultimate goal here, patient safety and patient benefit. Everything we've talked about today ultimately serves the patients. Systematic safety assures meaning, systematic safety assurance means patients can trust that your device is safe. Constant device performance means every device works as expected every time. Reduced failure rates mean fewer device malfunctions and better patient outcomes. Faster access to innovation means breakthrough devices reach patients sooner, not slower, and enhanced trust in medical devices benefits the entire industry. So this is why I'm passionate about design controls done right. They're not about bureaucracy. They're about ensuring that when a patient trusts their health to your device, that trust is well founded, and that is pretty much the ultimate goal. So, kind of bringing this all together, how does this create competitive differentiation? So, faster development cycles mean you get to market before your competitors. Higher quality outcomes mean better clinical results and better reimbursements. Regulatory submission success means you get cleared on the first submission, not the third. Scalable operations means you can grow without constantly hitting the ceiling. And sustainable growth means you can build a company that lasts, not just a one device wonder. Your company built on systematic excellence, rising above competitors who are still treating design controls as compliance burdens. This is achievable. So, you know how to actually so how do you actually implement this? Well, let me give you a clear roadmap. Step one, assess your current state. Where are you now? What's working? What's not? And step two, define a scalable framework. Design the system you need, not the system you see in textbooks. And step three, train your team. Everybody needs to understand not just the what, but the why. And then step four, implement incrementally. Start with one project, prove out the value, then expand. And then step five, measure and improve. Track metrics, learn from each project, continuously improve your system. The key is to start. Don't wait for the perfect system. Start with one project, implement a basic framework, learn and improve. Perfection is the enemy of progress. So let me share you some common pitfalls to avoid, save you some pain, actually. First, over documentation in the early stages. Don't create extensive documentation in the concept phase. You'll waste time documenting things that change. Second, treating reviews as formalities. If your technical design reviews are just rubber stamp events, you're missing the value of having those. Third, ignoring user needs. Engineering driven designs fail when they don't solve the real user problems. So, pretty much validate as much as possible as you're going through the process. And then fourth, delaying risk assessment. Don't wait until verification to start thinking about risk. And fifth, viewing controls as separate from development. Integration is the key here. These pitfalls are avoidable when you understand the strategic purpose of design controls, learning from others' mistakes so you don't make them yourself. And then, so how do you know if your design controls are actually working? Well, you measure success. Track the time to market acceleration. Are you getting to market faster than before? Monitor reduced development costs. Are you spending less on rework and fixes? Measure regulatory submission success rates. Are you getting cleared on the first submission? Track post-market performance. Are you having fewer complaints and recalls? And measure team efficiency gains. Is your team more productive? These metrics can tell you whether your design controls are actually adding value or just adding bureaucracy. If you're not seeing improvements in these areas, then your system needs to be adjusted. You measure, you learn, you improve. So, what should you do when you leave here? Well, first, evaluate your current approach, honestly. Where are you at? Second, identify the scalability gaps. What's going to break as you grow? Third, plan team training. How will you bring everyone along? Fourth, select the appropriate tools. What technology will enable your digital design controls? And fifth, start with one project. Don't try to change everything at once. Pick one device, implement the principles, prove the value, then expand. So the journey to strategic advantage starts with the next device. So my challenge to you is simple. Take the one thing from today's session, implement it on your next project, just one, build it from there, and remember, design controls are not the enemy, they're your competitive advantage.
Oh my gosh, I feel like there's a mic drop there. There's a mic drop as well when you said perfection is the enemy of progress. We've all heard perfection is the enemy of good, but I love
Yep.
that perfection is the enemy of progress. Okay, we have a couple of questions. So
Yeah.
we have Michael says, from the point of view of a startup, how do you balance the need to avoid over documenting with the needs of controls for a class 3 device?
Uh, yeah. Over document on a class 3 device. It's all about what your document control system also is. So there's two things: documenting in the system versus documenting for knowledge base. A lot of it is making sure you've got the right people that understand what the needs are. And then those needs are your regulatory submission needs. Because you don't want to document everything. Hey, here's all our meetings. We've documented every single meeting. You want the outcomes of those meetings. You want decision risk logs. There's a lot of different tools, what do they call it? There's risk index logs and things like that that you can create to manage. Okay, is this important for the project or is this a business thing? And you can list those, and you and your team have to identify those and then move forward with, okay, what's important? What gets us moving to the next thing? I think that helped. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I love it. So another question that I was thinking about, because at Biolocity, we work with teams that their intellectual property is still housed at the university. and they're navigating this, building the technology and moving it so that it can now, they're going to form a company, they're going to move it out of the, they're going to option it or license it. Are there
Mhm.
any concerns they should have while the IP is still at the university as far as their design controls go to might have an impact on the IP or what they may have to basically redo when they start a company or reiterate on? Are there any concerns that they should know about as they make that transition translating out of the university?
That's a loaded question.
It is.
Um, so, um, actually, I had a conversation. I don't know if he's on Mike Fisher last, or was it this week? It might have been this week. Talking to him about the university creating a design control type system within itself, so they could help with some of this. So yeah, the thing if you've got a granted patent, the challenge with that, it's out there. So, the good thing is you're protected because it's out there. Um, but documenting, what you're going through or how you got to that, especially since you want to spin that out as a company. Design notebooks. I mean, right now, if you're just using paper and pencil, keeping that is a good idea. But also documenting something where you can use memos if you want to do something really non financial constrained, is create a document system that's just, hey, I've got this memo one, memo two, memo three, and you're kind of, hey, here was our purpose of this, here is our hypothesis that we were testing, here's our results, and you just keep saving those into some sort of simple file structure. At least that's a documentation and a path of how you got from A to B to C to D to F or G or Z, and then you could utilize that when you start the company. You say, hey, here's all this knowledge, and you don't lose it. It's not stuck in a paper notebook somewhere. And then you can take that with them. So I think that's the one thing I would do. If I was in research today and I'm like, hey, I might spin this company out, I would be documenting it into just electronically, Word or whatever, LibreOffice or whatever you use. So would that help with your question, or is
Yeah,
that
no, it does.
it's
And so your friend Mark has another great question for you.
good old Mark?
I love it. I love it. This conversation is touching on the difference between what is the minimum requirement of a regulatory agency versus best practices for business. So, for example, de-risking to attract VC and capital. His question to ponder, and for you to ponder, Jason, is what is the intent of this document? And a mature QMS would define the document intent, business versus compliance. I love that, Mark. Jason, can you dig into this? Because when I've in the past I used to really be on the circuit at conferences speaking to teams about how to pass FDA inspections. So we had a lot of
Mhm.
questions, we had a lot of comments about, yes, if you didn't document it, it didn't happen.
Yep.
However, you have to be very thoughtful about your SOPs. You have to be very thoughtful about what you document in your CAPAs and stuff. Can you kind of lean into what Mark is addressing in this situation?
Yeah. So again, a good doc control process, like a design control process, let's talk about that, shouldn't have 49 revisions of that document. It shouldn't be that, there shouldn't have been that many changes to it. Because what happens is people will take a design control process or procedure and, oh, well, the FDA said this, or one person said this, or one, and they keep adding to it. And that's why I think today teams get just, oh, design controls is a burden because I got to fill out 9,000 things because somebody had a thought that it could be a problem. Where when I went to CR Bard, one of the things that I did is I redid the entire design control system with several of the other folks there, and we took something that was able to, it worked for them and it worked for the FDA, or it worked for the FDA. Didn't really work for the engineers trying to get products through it. So we rewrote it, redid the design controls, and we're able to get more products through, and the FDA liked it. So there is a balance. You just have to figure out what that balance is. And there are plenty of companies out there that have their dot control systems that are scalable and that meet the requirements for the FDA, but also allow it to be something that you can move fast and forward with, furiously through it. So it is a balance. It's
Right.
there's no right. I don't think there's a right answer. It's a but there is a balance, and you have to figure out who that or what it is. And there's a lot of people with a lot of experience out there, and I would tap into it.
Amazing. Okay, so thinking about that, especially with the fractional work you do, and a lot of our teams, right? There is no reason at the beginning, the start of something where you're going to hire someone full time who that's what they do is a quality management system or design
Yeah,
control or something like this. So there's a lot of benefit of bringing in a fractional team member to do this. Now, with that said, some teams, here's the controversial portion of it, Jason. Some teams may say, well, when I hire this consultant, the consultant wants to add a whole bunch of billable hours. So
yeah.
they're saying I have to do all of these things. What advice would you give to our budding entrepreneur company starters on how to balance what they really need and how they can find the right partner in a fractional setup to set them up for success? It's kind of aligned with seeing their vision, but not reducing their runway to a point
Yeah.
where they are now a dead company.
Yeah, and that's a lot of that. Interview them, get to know them, ask questions. Yeah, because there are a few people out there that do what I'm doing, and the goal is you've got to make sure that you jive with that person, and then there's tasks and milestones and things like that that they're achieving. Like my expertise is more on class 2 devices. So if somebody comes to a class 3 device, I'm going to be very transparent. It's like, look, I focus mostly on class 2. I will help you on the class 3. So it's all a conversation and just getting to know people in the ecosystem that have worked. I've worked with a ton of people in the Atlanta ecosystem. So getting to know that person, and making sure that they have, when you're asking them for something, that it's a tangible um, ask. It's not just, "Hey, I'd like you to design vaporware for me." Ask them, what do you want them to do? And then just start that conversation, and if you don't like it, cut them. You know, if somebody hired me and I wasn't cutting it, cut me. Let's have the conversation because I want somebody to be successful. I don't wanna just bill hours that nobody's making a product or getting a product to the market faster.
Okay, so leaning in a little bit more to that, as a fractional or an external leader in the med tech space, how do you try and integrate with the existing teams and drive adoption of some rigorous design control processes? Keeping in mind as well is that we as engineers and researchers and clinicians that are haven't had as many different what I would say paths into industry. Sometimes we really think we know everything. We think, and I'm saying we myself, right? Like I think I know everything. I think that the disease indication or what I'm building, it doesn't need to be perfect because there's such a huge unmet need. The FDA is going to overlook
Yeah.
these things. So, how do you, as an external person, come in and collaborate with the team and try and drive and start this culture of these processes in a healthy mechanism?
Yeah, I mean, you hit the word culture. So it's all about culture. I mean, my goal is I'm there to help. I'm not there to stop what you're doing. I'm not there to say, "Hey, you're completely wrong." It's I'm trying to get in there and understand what are you doing right now and what do you want to change? And how do you get there? And a lot of it is structured around culture. If there's anything I've learned over the last 10 years is understanding the culture of the company. Company A is going to be a little different than company B, where you've got people that just how they work, what they want to work on, what motivates them, and just getting in there and trying to understand people. Yeah, that's the biggest challenge. Um, so I think that answers your question. I
Yeah.
think it's
Well, well, one of the things I was just talking about this, Jason, the other day is we just opened up applications. So for anyone listening,
Mhm.
just
Yep,
opened up applications for the
I
new.
saw that.
Yes, cohort. So if you're coming up with something amazing, you should apply. And I also want the ecosystem to understand is that one of the things when I joined Biolocity at the beginning of the year that I instituted is a coachability rating that we
Yep.
give for all applicants. So as we work with them, we're looking to see how coachable they are because I know
Yeah.
in my way too many years of experience, more than 20, that if they're not coachable, it ties into that culture piece and you have challenges.
Yep.
So I think that that coachability component of it and willing to bring in the experts is really important in that space.
And that's a challenge with engineers, and probably even more so with entrepreneurs, because we do think, we all get trained the same when we start, and then it's our experiences that kind of give us this understanding and know-how. So I have to learn how to tell somebody nicely that what they're doing is going to waste time and money, and but it's also on them to, hey, I hired you, maybe I should listen to you. So uh, if somebody hires me and tells me what to do every single time, well, you can go hire an intern and tell them what to do. I'm bringing in a lot of people that are probably even on the call here are bringing expertise, and the goal is to understand what does everybody give. It's like when if I start working with somebody, I want to know what that company's like, who that CEO is, what is their training, what are they, because if they've got some training that I don't have, man, I am going to exploit that. I am going to try to understand that as much as possible while I'm giving them my insights on what they're doing or what they need to do.
Amazing. Okay, so why don't we end up the conversation with
Yeah.
the elephant in the room, the impact of AI on this area. And thank you, Eric, for putting into the chat the link to something you just recently worked on that ties to AI. But when we go to artificial intelligence and the improvements that's happening, how do you handle, innovation within the design control frameworks? And where do you see things going next? And actually, we may go a little bit longer than 1 o'clock because what I also want to hear is what are some of the things that the individuals and the teams here should make sure that are risks of using AI if you're not bringing a human into the loop to make sure that you're being successful.
Interesting. I've had this conversation this week, last week, and this week on AI. There are companies out there doing design controls with AI. And some of these are to the point where, hey, I've got this material change on this product, and I need to know what documentation to change. Where the AI will actually go through and provide you with the document with the change in it. Like it will basically redline your document. So that's bad in my mind if we just let AI move that forward. But this is where we have to have the human aspect into it. And the conversation that I had with somebody was, hey, that's great. But for a principal engineer or a senior engineer, they're going to probably look at that and go, hey, that's the right change. Yeah, I'm good. I'm good with it. But a junior engineer that just got out of college, they don't know what's right or wrong. So then my question is, what's going to happen in 5 or 10 years or 15 years when some of these more mature engineers retire? How are how are the design controls going to eh, how is it going to align with a junior engineer? Do they really understand what that change is because they haven't physically done it? Because a lot of engineers get trained by, hey, go into sustaining engineering and learn all these material changes, and you're going to do 300 of those in the next 5 years. So now they've got this inherent knowledge, and but the AI can make mistakes. It can hallucinate. Somebody mentioned to me that the FDA right now is looking at the design control AI stuff, and they don't want the AI to submit the red lines. They want human interaction at that point. But again, you don't know if it's wrong if you don't have that previous experience. So it is. I think there are risks with that, but I think we need the human element in that in order to make sure that it's not going to hallucinate. And but the thing we also have to realize is with med devices, if there's any changes to the documentation, that typically, especially your product specs and things like that, or your application FMEAs, your design FMEAs, a lot of that goes into then your design outputs, which then require verification. So, or so
Love it.
that's I think it will get. Looks like Eric is big on this. So
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, just as Mark is your friend, Eric is my friend, and
okay,
we have a lot of these conversations about AI.
yeah,
But both of us are, and I'm going to share his comment to everyone, Eric, that you just put in there, is that I'm a big believer in AI and utilizing it to amplify the work that you do. And it should be more like a colleague, not a replacement, and you need to have the critical learning skills, the
yep,
critical problem solving, and those pieces
yes,
of it to assure success. So I think it's more of like a partner when you need. I mean, AI,
so
Jason wrote your bio that I read earlier. So
don't
thank
tell
you,
everybody
AI, for that.
that.
I love it. I love it. So this has been amazing. Thank you so much for your time.
Yep.
To everyone who is listening, I did put into the chat the links for our YouTube channel. Please go in and subscribe. Check out the playlist to make sure they are curated playlists. They will continue to grow as we build additional evergreen collateral. I also put the link to our website, which has our schedule, as well as the link to our email distribution list to make sure that you stay in the loop. And Jason, I know you showed your QR code, but can you tell anyone that may be listening to this in the future on YouTube or who is still here present in the room how they can connect with you and collaborate with you?
Well, very easy. LinkedIn. That's the first, and then the second is medtechcto.com. So
Love
very
it.
simple.
Love
All
it.
right.
Thank you so much for your time. We know you're really busy. We're glad you said yes to sharing your knowledge and information with us today.
No, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Alrighty, take care.